The purpose of this video is to walk you through the critical thinking assignment for Chem 120, that is the chemistry of hazardous materials. Now, we just completed a unit on radioactivity and radiation. We've talked about different types of radioactivity. We've talked about different sources of radioactivity. We've talked about nuclear power and the processes and that go into that. And so the purpose of this paper is to put you into a not that far-fetched situation where you are put in the position of what if a nuclear power plant was going to be built in your hometown? And how would you react to that? What would you do about that? Would you want the nuclear power plant in your town, or would you fight against having it? So just a little bit of background here. Nuclear power is roughly associated with about 20% of the power in the United States. And if you look closely, you can see that the majority of that nuclear power is concentrated in areas that are near larger cities. Now, the key word there is near larger cities. Most of these power plants are not actually in larger cities. They're in surrounding areas. And that's an important thing to note, because one of the most common things that I hear about this assignment is, oh, well, that'll never happen to me. My town's too small. They don't need it. They're not going to ever have it. Well, the reality of the situation is the majority of these triangles are in areas near big cities, but not in big cities. And some of them are in actually really small towns. And if you look into some of the things that are being developed with nuclear power, especially research, they're in really small areas. So this is a relevant topic, and this is something that is realistic, at least in some kind of way. So every little triangle here represents a nuclear power plant somewhere in the United States. Now, most nuclear power plants, other than those for research and military purposes, were built many years ago. Very few new power plants have been built. And they all operate on the same kind of premise, a light water reactor. And so if you're interested in learning more about light water reactors and how they work, I would suggest going to either of these two videos here in the document. Now, if you're in a PDF, these are clickable. You could click on either one of these. It'll take you to a link in YouTube. I'll also post these videos in YouTube and let you know what's going on. And you can access those from my page. So here's a scenario. Developers in your hometown want to create a nuclear power plant. The plant will be owned by the city, and it will generate enough energy for the needs of the town, plus some additional energy that can be sold to the surrounding communities at a profit. Now, the current cost of nuclear power is slightly higher than what we have traditionally here in Indiana, which is coal-fired power. And so I've given a scenario here where it's about half a cent more per kilowatt hour. Not terribly large, but enough that you would notice it in your monthly bill, especially over the course of the year. So what you're being asked to do is this: research the pros and cons of nuclear power and develop a position. When it comes to a vote in your community, will you be in support of building the nuclear power plant, or will you be against the nuclear power plant? And so there's going to be some research involved. There's going to be some digging that you're going to have to do. Now, in addition to a critical thinking assignment, this is also an ethical thinking assignment. And for the purposes of ethical thinking, what I want you to use are the 8 key questions. The 8 key questions were developed at James Madison University for a way of kind of framing different modes of ethical reasoning. Now, there are 8 dimensions to these: fairness, outcomes, responsibilities, character, liberty, empathy, authority, and rights. Each one of these has kind of sub-questions that go along with it. Here's the thing. You are not going to need to address every single one of these 8 questions. In fact, some of them really have no bearing whatsoever on the problem that is being um, posed here. However, what you're going to want to do is pick probably 3, maybe 4 of them and really dig deep into them. So, from a matter of outcomes, for example, does building the power plant achieve good short-term and long-term outcomes? Or does it achieve poor short-term and long-term outcomes? That's an ethical dimension that you can really flesh out and look at. And there are others in there as well. There are also others in here that really have very little to do with the problem. And so you need to take that into consideration. So to get you started, I have 3 videos here. Now this first one is pretty interesting. This is a TED Talks debate between a well-known environmentalist who is actually speaking in favor of nuclear power and a researcher from a college in California that is speaking against nuclear power from the standpoint of he's touting renewables, wind and solar, geothermal, as a solution to our energy crisis. So it's a good video. It's a little bit long. It's almost half an hour. But there is some good information that they share that you can use. Now the second 2 videos here, these are shorter. They're about 5 minutes each. And they get into some of the commonly held reasons why nuclear power is, bad and why it is a good thing. And so I would encourage you to watch all of these. And again, I'll link to these in my on my YouTube page and in Blackboard so that you have them. Now, some quick deadlines. When it comes time, the question submission process, what you're actually going to turn in for the grade, you have to fill that out using some kind of word processing software. It can be Microsoft Word, it can be Google Documents, but you have to submit it through Blackboard using the critical thinking assignment link. And that link, if you're on our Blackboard page, we're looking for critical thinking, and the form that you submit is right here. So you click on that and you'd submit everything in this way right here. Now to make it a little bit easier, we have included here a submission form. So you do not have to actually write a full-on essay. If you want to, you can. But if you don't want to, if you want to work on this in pieces, or if you want to use this in kind of chunks, this answer sheet, which is on the assignment page, is one way that you can do it. And so you can see it breaks it up into sections. Introduction. This is what you need to answer in the introduction section. Here's how long it has to be. You can type it in. You can type in your answer right there. Section 2, here are the opposing viewpoints. You have to have at least 1 paragraph for each side of the debate. Section 3, what are some biases and influences? So here's where you include your ethical arguments. Here's where you include your alternative arguments. So looking at not just the impact of the radiation potential or the nuclear power plant itself, but the financial considerations, the environmental considerations, the social considerations, the economic considerations, and how do these impact you? In section 4, you're getting into your own personal position statement. So what side of the argument do you come down on? Why do you choose it? and then kind of wrapping things up and putting in your works cited. So this page is one way to do the assignment, and if you do it this way, it does it does actually bring down the amount of writing that you have to do. You don't have to do quite as much writing because you're not putting in all those extra sentences and you know, the all the things that make an essay an essay. So those are there for your benefit. If you need another copy of this, it's always right here. It's this orange link right here. Now, along the way, you are going to have to submit 4 sources with brief descriptions of the arguments and information, just a brief annotation, a couple of sentences. That is due into Blackboard by April 3rd. So we're talking about 1 week from this coming Friday. In addition, we are looking at a draft of all answers. So I'm requiring you to submit a draft. Simply submitting the draft will get you 15 points. But the whole point of the draft is to give you feedback on your responses and allow you a chance to improve. And so you'll submit that review by April 17th. I will return them by April 26th, and then everything is due in Blackboard on May 5th. And so the next piece here, this is where you get a case-by-case breakdown. All of these are in that answer sheet, by the way. You can pull it there, and then this is your grading rubric. So this is how you're actually going to be evaluated. So the introduction section is worth 6 points. To get all 6 points, you have to make sure that you address all of the parts in the 6-point box. If you don't, then it drops down to 4 points or 2 points or 0 points, depending upon what you have. For the evidence, same thing. You're presenting evidence for and against the topic, but you're also providing external resources. You're not just winging these evidences off the top of your head. You actually are grounding it in real research. Here's the section on biases and influences. Here's the section on the position statement, and then there are just some other pieces here as well. You can read at your leisure. So that's the critical thinking assignment. It is going to take you some time to do. However, if you do it well, and if you pay attention to the feedback that I give you after the rough draft, you can do really well on this assignment. So if you have any questions about things, please feel free to ask. Contact me at any way that you can, as you know, and I will talk to you again later this week.